Paul's offering today has been shrouded in secrecy. So,
what was that?
I said it's been shrouded in secrecy, so we're looking forward to.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
As many here will recognize, particularly those who took the Third Man Sewer Tour yesterday, this is the Harry Line theme from the movie Der Dritte Mann, The Third Man, filmed here in Vienna in 1949, a movie so renowned that it has its own museum. But why am I here playing the piano here today? In order to give context to that question, I need to play this first. This was a song from another famous movie. It's the Play It Again Sam song, As Time Goes By, from the film Casablanca. It was last year during what was a very enjoyable time in Tunis for the 5th annual Sir Richard Francis Burton conference that I had mentioned at dinner one evening that I had learned to play As Time Goes By in case anyone wanted to sing at a party or something. And as it turned out, Hajar Maladi put on a wonderful party at her house in Tunis. And one point I was asked to play their piano a little bit. But that was the end of it as far as I was concerned. Little did I suspect that Mick Walton would get the inspiration to envision utilizing the piano at the next Burton conference and then asking an amateur from Minnesota to play here in the musical capital of the world. But it so happened, and so here I am today. Now, I know precious little of that Burton ever wrote about music, and as far as I am aware, nothing about piano. However, this quote from Burton regarding music interests me. This is his quote. "I wasted time and money and presently found out my mistake and threw up music altogether. At stray times I took up the flageolet and other simple instruments as though I had a kind of instinctive feeling how useful music would be to me in later life. And I never ceased to regret that I had not practiced sufficiently to be able to write down music at hearing. Had I been able to do so, I might have collected some 2,000 motives from Europe, Asia, Africa, and America, and have produced a musical notebook which would have been useful to a Bellini, a Donizetti, or a Boito." So obviously, he was keenly aware of music and that he was encountering it. So anyway, today I'm going to play some short selections from some well-known compositions, or in a few other cases, representations of music from other cultures. And for the most part, the music is supposed to be, or to represent, music Burton might have conceivably heard in his time visiting or staying in various locales. And then too, this music is meant often to be also of those times as well. As an academic scholarly exposition, this is likely to sail as a very leaky ship indeed, but it is nevertheless hoped that we might find a little bit of entertainment here of one kind or the other. Now, in the movie The Mountains of the Moon, there's a scene at the ball in, I believe, in Boulogne, France, where Richard and Isabel have their first dance. The film has them playing this jig. this ball in her book, The Life of Captain Sir Richard Francis Burton, where she writes, "And there was Richard like a star among rushlights. That was a night of nights. He waltzed with me once and spoke to me several times." So if it was in fact just one dance, and if that dance was a waltz, it might conceivably, possibly have been this one, published in 1843, close to that time, by a Polish composer who lived in France. Now here is a piece from Vienna, this one having been composed many years earlier by one of Vienna's very favorite residents and continually in play ever since. This piece is the Turkish march from Mozart's Sonata No. 11, the Rondo alla Turca. Mozart is said to have admired the Ottoman Empire and to have liked the Mehmet music of the Janissary marching bands, and was thus inspired to compose this march in the style of the Turks. Mozart would not, I am sure, have presumed his beautiful and very famous piece to be an authentic realization of the Mehmet music. It does, however, carry the pulse and some of the spirit of that music. So it appears to me then that here the two geniuses, Mozart and Burton, shared in this, the admiration of an interest in cultures other than their own. And I, as a non-genius, also admire other cultures and their music, and I know at least enough to realize that the music of cultures other than my own is often very different, and sometimes different to the point that it is presumptuous to try to imitate or express it on something, for example, as the piano. So when I, with respect, attempt to represent music from Tunisia, Somalia, and India, and even Brazil, this is done with admiration and appreciation, but with no presumption that what I play is to any sufficient degree authentic, but is instead offered in order to include these pieces in this presentation as part of the span of what Burton may have encountered in his travels. So here's something based on a Tunisian folk song from when Burton visited Tunis, and where the members of our conference walked through the same bookseller's alley where he likely searched for the book, I believe, The Perfumed Garden in its original. Aman, Aman. Next, here is something Burton could have heard, but yet could not have heard. Boy. That song was penned in 1910, too late for the Burtons. However, the melody it is based upon, Londonderry Air, would have been something they could have indeed heard. The Burtons visited Ireland in 1864. The tune for Londonderry Air was officially published in 1855 in the book The Ancient Music of Ireland. Now let's go to the Indian subcontinent. Burton was stationed there for many years, and he must have during those times heard a vast musical cornucopia, whether he intended to or not. Here is a brief representation of a raga melody, the Rag Bhairav. Exotic place to the next. What continent would you suppose this one came from? Well, it's a surprise question. It wasn't a continent, it's an island. This is the Icelandic national anthem. Burton visited there in 1874, or I don't know exactly. This was published in 1874, just right before he got there. I imagine he heard the national anthem at some point there, maybe. All right, let's return again to Vienna for a piece by another of its favorite sons, Franz Schubert. This is Die Forelle, the trout, the song used as a theme in Schubert's renowned trout quintet. It might be said that Schubert, in the song text, was along with other things expressing a sentiment to spare the innocent trout swimming in the stream, whose cruel destiny it was to be caught by the fishermen. Here, just as Burton might have shared Mozart's appreciation of the Turks, that is, an interest in another culture, I think Burton might possibly have also now shared with Schubert some of the composer's presumed compassion for the animal kingdom. As to that, note the several comments in Burton's writing relating to Speke's bloodlust in Africa, in hunting, and also, whether historically accurate or not, there's a scene in The Mountains of the Moon where Burton begs off Speke from shooting some lions. "Don't shoot those beauties, Jack. I'll see if I can drive them off." Of course, in that scene, immediately following Burton's lion whispering, as it were, he requires a crack shot from Speke to save him from yet another lion who's about to leap upon him and kill him. So perhaps a bit of perspective there. But at any rate, for our purposes, in Schubert's The Trout, we find another similarity of outlook between the musical geniuses of Vienna and Sir Richard Francis Burton. During Burton's amazing adventures in Somaliland and other regions of Africa, he might have heard, somewhere along the way, something at least vaguely similar to this, which is a representation of an old song from rural Somalia. Perhaps a motif from this song might have then gone into that musical notebook he would have filled, had he, as he himself commented, practiced sufficiently to be able to write down music at hearing. the summer of 1860, prior to his trip to Salt Lake City to visit the Mormons, Burton was traveling through the southern United States, where the Confederacy would soon be formed. While there, it is very likely you might have heard this one. Which became something of an anthem for the Confederacy during the Civil War. If Burton liked it, however politically incorrect that might seem to some, he would nonetheless have had good company in his liking of it. None other than Abraham Lincoln is quoted as saying, "I've always thought Dixie one of the best tunes I've ever heard." Following the weeks in the South, Burton continued on with his memorable trip to visit the Mormons in Salt Lake City, out in the American West. Once in company with the Mormons in what was to become the state of Utah, Burton may well have heard the following melody, which shares common claimants. The Americans claim it as Columbia, the gem of the ocean, the British as Britannia, the pride of the ocean, and the Mormons as the tune for their hymn, Up, Awake, Ye Defenders of Zion, which was published in 1857, shortly before Burton's visit. Stagecoach journey have heard a tune with a different personality expressing another of the American musical moods of the time, Shenandoah. That he wished that the original Native American names for places were kept rather than changed as they often were. Nowadays in the United States, rather that statement would qualify him as woke. Here we are again in Vienna with a piece that virtually every piano student has been assigned. It was extant while the Burtons were visiting Vienna, and if they happened to stroll down a residential street or past a music studio, they would almost certainly have heard it somewhere or other. Mozart was supposed to have said afterwards, "That boy will make a big noise in the world." And Mozart was certainly right about that. Now here Burton might be seen to share yet another correspondence with great composers of Vienna. This is a joke, so you should laugh at this. So when himself then a lad, he must have made quite the big noise when he broke his violin over his teacher's head. Thank you. In either case, I can't help but think that Beethoven and Burton would have gotten along smashingly, no pun intended. Now heading back to the Americas, this time South America, the Brazilian environments. Here's a piece representing a form called the lundu, which in the first half of the 19th century was a predecessor to and one of the sources of the development of what we now call Latin American music. Back in Vienna one more time, there's one piece that if you took a poll, let's say in Minnesota in the United States, as to which cultural expression would be most identifiable as being of Vienna, the most repeated answer might likely be the Blue Danube Waltz. Published in 1866, it has been popular ever since, and very likely heard by the Burtons. Perhaps they even danced to it during the time they visited Vienna. Here's the first section. Now for the second to last piece, a nod to the Burtons' time in Trieste. Here's another widely known melody published in 1880. Isabel had written that she took singing lessons while residing there. She may well have studied this song and sung it, maybe even for Richard. It is Funiculi Funicula. Here's another song from 20th century America. So Burton would not have heard it unless, of course, he could time travel, which, quite frankly, I would not have put past him. But aside from something like that, as far as the matter of music being of his times and places, it might just be considered that, in a sense, that in our times, in these times, anywhere that the Sir Richard Burton Society happens to meet is now one of his times and places. So a favorite song which I wanted to play in tunes but couldn't figure out the chords, now included as the last selection, Georgia on My Mind.
very much, Paul. That was completely charming. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I got one, yes. Yeah. The thing about him playing the flageolet, where was that from? Do you remember?
Where I read it was in the book by Isabel Burton, right? That's where I think I read it. It was something which she, yeah, that quote, that whole quote, right? Yeah.